Give me that, Dr. Gansworth, can you just say hello again?
Hi.
All right, I'm getting nothing but thumbs up. We're good to go if our wonderful moderators are ready to start.
You got it, Chris.
All right, terrific. Thank you very much. Dr. Gansworth, start us off.
All right. Kwe kakina buju misquadas indigena cause me naked big nindodem. Mami when any Anishinaabe kwe and dao chigwekang and donjaba. Name is Wendan we nijo medallion. Balape ho king nindao ma. So hi everybody. Sorry I can't be there in person. Thanks for bearing with the Zoom. My name is Leora Gansworth. I'm a band member of First Nation in Quebec, in so-called Quebec, Kitigan-Zibi Anishinaabe, and I am happy to share some thoughts with you today about some work that has been generations in the making. And I'm an assistant prof at Vassar in the emerging Native Studies correlate there.
So my name is Chris Bowser. I work for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and Cornell University in the Hudson River, centered about halfway between New York City and Albany at the Norrie Point Environmental Center. And just to kind of give you a biological update, we're going to be talking today about eels. Now, I would imagine that everybody in this room has at least a pretty good cursory knowledge about eels. So you probably love words like diagamous and catagamous, right? It's like, oh yes, give it to me. So eels are amazing because they hatch in salt water, likely the Sargasso Sea between Bermuda and Puerto Rico. They spend a year migrating to coastal estuaries from South America, Central America, North America. They enter these estuaries, and many of them will ascend up into tributaries. They'll spend 10 to 20 to 30 years of their lives there and eventually make their way back downstream to spawn once again somewhere out in the ocean, and the cycle of life goes on. It's an amazing story. And eels are thought to be panmictic, meaning that a beautiful female eel that grows up in the Delaware River and makes it back to the Sargasso Sea, there's no reason to think that her offspring go back to the Delaware. They might go back to hundreds of different rivers. So there's this beautiful mixing that happens. And because of that mixing, there's a few really good, almost philosophical parts of their biology. Helping eel populations in any one place helps eel populations in every place. And the corollary to that, threats to eels in one place can cause threats to eels in all places. So to talk a little bit about the values and some of those threats, back over to Dr. Gansworth.
Okay, miigwech. So there are, depending on which literature you're referring, anywhere from 18 to 19 species of anguillid eels distributed worldwide. The only one that comes into lands and waters of the North American continent is Anguilla rostrata. However, in working with peoples all around the world, both Bowser and I have learned in our own independent ways that the value of eels is really understated in our contemporary society, but has deep ancient origins. And so many of my ancestors of my Omamiwanini peoples living along the Ottawa River knew eel as a really important food, and there's so much more to say about that. Food is not just food. Food is also medicine. Food is also connectivity. Food is also a way for us to heal ourselves, to provide for ourselves, and to express our Indigenous legal traditions. So a lot of the times in the world that we know today, food, culture, ecology, these are all sort of segmented ideas. But in the Algonquin Anishinaabe and related knowledge systems and some of our relatives all across North America, the source of one of our primary medicines was the fatty flesh of eels. And so you can also make medicine and use the skin for other types of tools. And a lot of that knowledge is still alive in our communities today. And yet there has been such a change because of the colonial occupation of our waterways and the management by people who are not Indigenous to this area. And so there's a major threat to the connectivity of our way of life and our knowledge that pertains to eels. So Bowser, you can move to the next slide. And climate change, I think we all know that climate change sort of poses an existential threat. Many Anishinaabe elders have framed climate change as, yes, a technical and scientific problem, but also one that requires a change of minds and hearts. So we need to think differently about our relationships. We need to disrupt the status quo, and we need to stop using ineffective methods and ignoring the pleas and priorities of Indigenous peoples. So that's one piece. But another piece is that there's legacy contamination all throughout the Northeast. And eels, again, adults have a lot of fat content. They have a high lipid content. And those fat stores also bioaccumulate toxic material. So anything that these industries have been allowed to put into the water is also put into the eel's body and stays there for a long time. So that affects the migration and fertility. As well, there's countless dams and other barriers that have been installed, sometimes with the cooperation and collaboration of Native peoples, often not. And so we're just thinking about all of these issues as intertwined with the destiny of Native people, and thinking about the legacy of how these projects have gone into the land brings us to the contemporary situation where fisheries dominate, right? So fisheries are a big concern for a lot of people. We're talking commercial fisheries. There is a major global wildlife crimes network that targets specifically American eels, or that's what they're named here, right? In our people's language, we would say pimizi, and that refers again to the greasy nature of the meat and the flesh. So fisheries are I mean, on the one hand, there's a lot more to say, and we only have a few minutes here, so there's different types of fisheries, but on the global scale and the commercial scale, fisheries are one of the biggest threats today because eels are very, very valuable in their younger stages, and there's a lot to say there. But they've also been, and many of you know this and probably have participated in this, right? The stocking programs that have also introduced invasive species and parasites into local eels and to stock eels. So there's many, many threats from all directions. And yet some of the work that I've been privileged to do in my lifetime and career, which is really an expression of ancestral responsibility, shows me that there's a lot of hope, right? We don't have to continue doing these things. And so Bowser will talk about his perspective on hope and solutions.
So just like the threats come from all over the place, right? It's the classic all of the above, really, is what hurts eels. But I also, at the same time, I feel like we're in a really interesting inflection point when it comes to relationships with eels. There just seems to be, every time I look in the newspaper or magazine, I'll see articles about eels. Some of that is about some of the problems, the threats, the complexities of commercial fishing. But some of what I read about is some of the successes that we're hearing about in conferences like this, of eels in the Susquehanna, eels in the St. Lawrence, eels in places where people are actually caring. I know that one of the projects that I'm privileged to work on, along with my colleagues like Sarah and Minori, is the Eel Project in the Hudson River, where every year we train 1,000 volunteers to help us catch baby eels, those little eels coming from ocean to estuary, counting them to get a census and letting them go. And as important it is to collect that data, what I also think we're doing in that is we're helping people to discover eels in their neighborhood. Not just eels on a documentary or eels on an Instagram page, but eels in their community park where they are. And there's like building those in-place relationships with water and animals and sunshine and tides and people is crucial, which is, I think, a big part of what Leora and I and so many others are working on. We are trying to work to bring eels back. And that word and the people involved in that come from many different directions. Over to you, Leora.
Okay, so you perhaps have heard of landback, nervous chuckle, waterback maybe, but there's also the need for eels back. And so, like I said, there's if you're not familiar with Indigenous culture, it's rich, it's storied, there's thousands of years of knowledge and teaching about all the different animals that compose the native ecology here. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who are in self-appointed roles of water keeping or ecology, et cetera, but have never heard of an eel. And so we've gone directly to the source. Our group here, which is not an official organization of any kind, for the better part of 2 years now, there is sort of a key group of people from Indigenous nations spanning from the Canadian Maritimes into so-called Quebec, Ontario, and partially in the United States. And we are looking at sharing our knowledge with one another and reconnecting our communities to prioritize our perspectives about eels. So we have prioritized the participation of women, youth, and elders and knowledge keepers who are thinking about the species from sort of a multi-dimensional perspective. So the spiritual teachings about eels, as well as the cultural teachings, as well as fisheries practices and all the different methods that are so important. So these are photos, and I want to give full credit to Stephanie Hildebrand, who's a brilliant photographer, and works at the River Institute, which is based in Ontario. And they have a strong working relationship with Akwesasne. And so what we have here are just some of the folks that have participated in our events. But like I say, there's definitely room and more work for us to do to create the capacity to bring in all the partners that we need, because we see that we need all the tools that are available to us to solve this very complex issue of eel decline, which in the land where my grandmother and grandfather come from, along the Ottawa River, eels have been totally extirpated. And the story is true in many other areas as well. So we look to where we can sort of bring our knowledge together. And so these are some of the events and activities that we participated in. And I want to just sort of, I'm looking at the slide here. These are just some of the gatherings we've held since April. And when I say we, again, there's a whole group of consisting of Mi'kmaq, Algonquin, some people from Akwesasne, et cetera. And so there's a bunch of us, as well as conservation partners and Nation Wendat from Quebec. And we've all sort of moved around to different areas to share with our communities and wake up some of this knowledge.
I know that for my own self, I was just really happy to be invited to participate in this. And I wasn't able to go to the meetings in Canada, but thankfully the Eels Back group came to New York, and we were able to share a lot of the work that we're doing there. And when I say we, I don't just mean myself. I mean the larger people that are from many agencies that are doing work in New York, and we'll hear a little bit about that in just a minute. Oh, and I just have to say, one of my favorite things was we get together at Norrie Point, great little environmental center. You should come visit if you can, near Poughkeepsie. And just very, very organically on the whiteboard there, people just started writing down eel in different languages. From all over the world, and it was just a really wonderful collection. Don't worry, we took pictures before that was inevitably erased, because that's what happens. But it was just, this slide always makes me smile.
Yeah, and just a little bit of expansion there. There's just so many connections, right? When we have these events and bring people together. So on the top there you have, and I'm gonna just apologize for my very poor pronunciation, which is probably incorrect. I believe it's Yagana Holewista, who is a grandmother from Akwesasne, who brought her 3 beautiful granddaughters to share in this event and learn and pass knowledge on to the young people. And she created a quilt, and she's showing imagery and explaining her process of creation of that quilt. The quilt is called Sisters in Survival, and it refers to the persistence of eels trying to navigate the St. Lawrence among many, many, many barriers. And on the left-hand side, you can see some pictures, which were provided by none other than SUNY ESF's Dr. Carl Lindbergh of eel otoliths. So the pictures are quite different, quite quite different contexts, but they're sort of like echoing off one another, right?
Yeah.
And then we have Shelley Denny, who's a Mi'kmaq biologist that works in Mi'kmaq, and Abraham Francis, who's a member of Akwesasne, and there was just a lot of interesting ways to think about eels. So they're creating some beadwork here, and there's multiple expressions of how eels were showing up for people and touching their minds to be creative.
Chloe and Spencer did a wonderful job just like an hour ago talking about two-eyed seeing, this idea of so many multiple tools being used to approach things like conservation. Really tapping into indigenous knowledge, indigenous reservoirs. Also, tapping into sort of the Western academic settler traditions. Those are the traditions that I came up in. And using these things to move forward into the world, and when possible, using them in conjunction with each other. And part of the real joy of this program was watching this happen. I love this picture down here. This is Mo Grassi, one of our biologists, and this is Tristan Tucker. He's an enrolled member of the Delaware tribe in Oklahoma, and they're on a big stone weir in the upper Delaware River. This is Elder Carrie Prosper, Mi'kmaq from what many of us call Nova Scotia. And you can see this sort of V-shaped rock wall that is guiding these big silver eels on their way out to migrate. And we were all gathered there, thanks to Jess Best, to check out eels there. And the other thing it was great for people like me to learn from my Indigenous colleagues what was going on, but it was also wonderful for elders like Carrie to be teaching young people, young Indigenous people, like Tristan and Caitlin Hanks, both members of the Lenape tribes in Oklahoma, about eels. And they're on their own journey to kind of rediscover their homelands, and eels are a part of that journey. And in fact, one of the really interesting conversations that happened during this trip, really spurred on by these three people, was this idea of these big stone weirs that are one of the last examples of commercial fishing in the Northeast of silver eels. And these weirs are slowly sunsetting out as the families that operate them kind of age out. Some of the permits are not even renewed. It's interesting to have discussions about, can we envision a future where something like this is operated by Indigenous peoples, the peoples who put these weirs here in the first place, and can this be co-managed, or can something like this have multiple purposes of, yes, there's a cultural component, perhaps there's even a commercial component, and certainly there's a scientific component, because the whole reason we know about these is it's a great way to learn about silver eel migration out of the river. These are all complex issues when you get into eels, but we can't ignore the complexities. Part of the beauty of this is embracing the complexities and finding these new paths and ways forward. So I just thought that this day on the Delaware was really super special, and I'm so glad that we had that. And I guess what I'm talking about is transformative change, which back over to you, Leora.
Just checking in on time.
We should probably wrap it up.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I mean, we start a little late, but we got a couple minutes.
So could you advance ahead too, please?
Sure.
So I just want to mention something really quick, and that this is, you can read about this in the CBC and elsewhere if you just Google Kitagan-Zibi Anishinaabe and eels. So recently, the First Nation led a small grant process that was designed to advance innovative conservation solutions, prioritizing Indigenous leadership, and that was after the Tribal Council issued a resolution to the federal government, a Band Council resolution is what it's called in Canada, and that is a nation-to-nation request that the federal government and the industries that they empower to occupy our lands come into compliance with their own laws and protect eels that are migrating throughout the waters. So that means using evidence-based science and means using the best available technologies. And so that Band Council resolution was communicated to the federal government and made public. And since then, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans in Canada has initiated, various funding calls for First Nations to advance their steps toward working on this very complex, wicked problem that is, again, decades in the making. So it's very much about culture, it's about policy change, and it's about visioning a future where eels have their rightful place, because they have given so much to us over the generations, and it is time for us to also be reduced in our governance barriers and receive opportunities, great opportunities for eels back.
And with that, I think, in closing, this is an effort that we are going to continue. We're going to continue in this multi-people kind of way. We're going to keep trying to grow these partnerships. If you out there have some ideas, have some expertise, have some connections, and have some desires to be a part of bringing eels back in whichever direction that comes from, please keep in touch with us, because we absolutely intend to keep moving forward. Dr. Gansworth, any last words?
Miigwech Bizendawik. Thank you, everyone. And I am Gwamasin. Be brave.
Thank you, everyone.